In the Emerald Isle, something unexplainable is happening. Tonight, prepare to witness the most frightening event in horror podcast history. A journey into the depths of horror history. First Class Horror presents the Class Horror Cast. Evil wears many masks, but pure horror wears only one. Support First Class Horror on Patreon for as little as $1. Can't get enough of the horror? Carve yourself a deal from official merchandise, only on Teespring. Join us on all social media at First Class Horror. We have such sights to show you.
Joe Russo is a writer, director and producer, best known for his movie The Au Pair Nightmare, which he co-wrote and directed. He was also one of the driving forces behind the Nightmare Cinema on Shudder and producing Postmortem with Mick Garris. Joe has worked with and continues to work with companies like MGM, Netflix, Shudder, Skydance and many more. He is one of the top producers in the industry and a top prospect in writing and directing, all while finding the time to record his own podcast, Hollywood Hangover. Joe has some great insights into the movie-making industry and with a real focus on horror. During our chat, we talk about his journey, advice for aspiring creatives, the Halloween franchise, and much more. He tells some never-heard-before stories and gives us a glimpse inside his extensive knowledge of the industry and the genre. I hope you all enjoy this episode as much as I did. I know you're a busy man, so taking the time, I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So first things first, I like to get out of the way. Where can people find you? Anything you'd like to plug or promote or anything like that?
Oh, man. You can find me on Twitter at Joe Russo Tweets and on Instagram at Joe Russo Graham. And I'm sure we're going to be talking about plenty of things to plug, but obviously, the Postmortem podcast with Mick Garris, that's kind of my baby. Nightmare Cinema, my other two movies that I wrote and one that I directed, The Au Pair Nightmare and Hard Kill. That's kind of my breadth of work.
Nice. The links for everything will be down below anyway. So wherever anybody's listening to this, everything will be linked below in the description. So I guess jumping straight into it, can you remember your first horror movie you ever saw or your first maybe horror related experience?
Yeah, I can. To me, are we encompassing gateway horror into that question? Or are you talking about like pure horror? So gateway horror for me was always Ghostbusters. It's my favorite movie of all time. And, it was just right amount of scary and funny. And that coupled with my parents' love of Halloween, it just, I fell in love with all things supernatural and horror. But the first scary movies I vividly remember watching, there's two that really kind of stick out in my mind. I saw, and ironically, in retrospect, it's an action movie with a monster, but I saw Predator way too young, and it scared the bejesus out of me.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah. When Carl Weathers gets his arm ripped off, and oh my gosh. And then the other one was I caught, ironically, one of the worst in the series, but I caught Friday the 13th, Jason Takes Manhattan on TV.
Nice.
Way too young. And it terrified me. So those were the two vivid memories I have of catching movies probably before I should have, and really leaving a scarring impact.
It's funny because I feel like Predator probably doesn't get enough credit in a way for how scary that character was intended to be. And I think it's the most recent Predator movie. There's a scene where they're in a lab and they get trapped inside. And I really feel like that kind of reintroduced maybe mainstream to how scary Predator is supposed to be.
I mean, I think that, it's obviously it's the tough alien, right? It's so I think you're right. I do think it gets that kind of rap, but you know, I mean, when you think about it, like Arnold and his team are supposed to be the best of the best, the strongest, the fastest, the best warriors we have, and they're just getting decimated by this thing. You know, I mean, that's terrifying. So
yeah, it's kind of funny, and I think like even with Alien versus Predator, like you said, Alien was always like the scary,
the spooky, quiet, hiding in the shadows one. Yeah, and then Predator just jumps out and punches you in the face.
Yeah,
you know, knocks your head off. But yeah, I mean, there really is something super compelling about the idea of taking these human warriors, our best and strongest, and just watching them get totally manhandled by this beast of a creature. You know,
it's crazy to see like that. Predator is still a thing. I recently seen online Predator has actually come to Fortnite now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it just shows you, like, I think they have I don't play Fortnite or anything, but I think they actually created a zone on the map that was similar to the jungle, and you can go in and you can do challenges against like an AI predator. Oh,
that's really neat. That's kind of like the Friday the 13th game.
Yeah,
that's cool. They are doing another Predator movie right now. The director of 10 Cloverfield Lane is doing it, which is really exciting. I think that'll be really cool.
Yeah, I'm interested to see. I always feel like it's a character who has kind of gotten overshadowed in a way. Things have come together.
I mean, it's tough. I mean, Predator 2 is fun, but like outside, like there hasn't really been a great Predator movie since the first one, you know? And you could also argue there hasn't really been a lot of great Alien movies either. Honestly, for a franchise that is so like popular and well known, it's really only the first two entries in both of those franchises.
Yeah, which is funny.
Yeah. Because I mean, like even if you look at something like Halloween and Friday the 13th and stuff, they're peaks and valleys, you know. But those two franchises peaked early, and we've been chasing that dragon ever since.
Yeah. So growing up, were you a collector of anything like movies, toys, anything like that?
Movies? No, not really, because my dad used to, we would watch tons of movies because he would go to the video store and he would record the VHS onto another tape. So we had a massive library of movies, but we didn't actually have like the physical VHSs. I got into DVDs in college, but and now I don't know where to put any of them. But when I was in like elementary school, middle school, comic books and comic book trading cards, that was the thing that I collected the most.
It's funny, and everybody I talk to, and including myself, I feel like everyone has something like that at some point in life, whether maybe they get back to it later in life or never again. At some point, I think probably 99% of people you talk to will have some form of collection of something.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I mean, there's definitely, I have friends who collect all sorts of movie memorabilia and such, but my wife doesn't like it around our apartment, you know, in LA. So it's kind of like when I used to have an office when I was at a production company, and I had all that stuff displayed there. And ever since I've kind of gone independent and I've been working from home, it's all sitting in boxes. So I kind of can't wait until I can, we get a bigger place and I'll bring it all back out again.
Yeah. And it's tough as well because I feel like I spoke with someone a couple of weeks ago and they kind of said like it's a really fun thing to collect and display and kind of have your own museum, if you want to say, but it's like it never stops. You can never have enough. There's always something. Like I might see something you've got and go, wow, I need that, or how do I get that? And it's never enough.
My go-to editor was just texting me this morning because he picked up these Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle toys that have just come out that are cartoon, like the cartoon that when we were kids, the toys are being made to actually look more like the cartoons than the ones we actually bought and played with when we were kids. And I'm just like, oh, I want those so much, but I don't have anywhere to put those things right now. So even just displaying like the posters of my movies has been a challenge with her. So and my Nightmare Cinema Rotten Tomatoes certified fresh trophy. Even that,
That's
finding
a cool
a prominent place for that has been a fight with her. So it remains a constant challenge to try to see what I can sneak in. But if you look really closely at our very clean apartment, you'll see little like bits and pieces here and there.
Yeah, I find that a lot as well. I'm lucky that I have an office where I can put everything. But I like before I had this, it was the same thing, and I feel like everyone I talk to, it's a similar thing. It's like I guess everybody starts with good intentions. Maybe you might have a small area where you display something or a bookcase, and then it becomes, well, maybe I can have 2 bookcases, and maybe it can become everything.
She literally, when we moved into this newest place, she found these storage units within our new entertainment center, so she can put so I don't even have my DVDs displayed anymore. Like they're all in this shelving of the entertainment center. Mm-hmm. So it's like it's great. I mean, the place looks like I said, immaculate, but it's like almost like I have to keep my geeky side closeted,
hidden away. So yeah, I get that. When did you decide that you wanted to be involved in like the movie making industry and in any form, I guess?
It's funny. I grew up in Connecticut, which, in America is about as far away from Hollywood as you can possibly get. Mm-hmm. So I never really considered it a viable career until I got to college. My family had moved to Arizona, which was much closer to Hollywood. And I was transferring from the university I was at in Connecticut out to Arizona State. And I was like, well, maybe now is the time that I should really consider. I love movies. Mm-hmm. I'm really fascinated by movie making. And now that I'm going to be closer than ever, maybe I should see if I'm any good at it, And it was there when I started making my first couple of, amateur and student films. And it seemed like I had some kind of knack for it, But the real moment was that fall before I moved out. There was a filmmaking seminar that a friend from high school took me to called the Action Cut Filmmaking Seminar. It was a weekend seminar taught by the guy who directed like Children of the Corn 5 or 6.
Nice.
And I sat there and I was like, oh, this sounds pretty fun. I think I could do this, not knowing any clue how hard it was going to be. But that was the moment where I think the light switch flipped, and I was like, I should try to pursue this.
So you moved from Connecticut to Arizona, or? Yep,
I did. And I lived in Arizona for several years. And at the time that I was finishing up film school there, and there was still tax incentives. So there were still projects from LA coming into town. So the first movie I ever worked on was The Kingdom, directed by Peter Berg, mm-hmm. Produced by Michael Mann. And I just was in awe of watching this giant Universal movie and the machinery of it all. And, I was on set for when they did this spectacular car crash sequence that's in the movie. And I was just watching them drop cars out of the sky. And I was running Gatorades to stunt people. And I was like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
I want to do this. So.
And from that point, then, did you make the jump to LA before things kind of really started to maybe pop off for you specifically?
Oh yeah. No, what I realized when I moved to Los Angeles, the tax incentive ended at the beginning of 2010, and all of the work started drying up in Arizona, and I had to go to LA. And when I got there, I realized that all of the things that I had accomplished in Arizona counted for diddly squat once I got to Los Angeles. And I basically had to start over, which was, a little frustrating, but I took it on the chin and kept my head up. And I got an internship at a production company called Level 1 Entertainment. And I worked there throughout the summer. and I made a good impression on the folks that were there. And I had a couple short films that were playing the festival circuit at that exact moment in time. And I got a meeting with the CEO. And what I didn't know was the CEO's assistant was transitioning out of that job. And they were looking for a replacement. And when they saw my shorts, the CEO of the company said, look, you've got the talent, you've got the entrepreneurial spirit, you don't know anyone, you don't know how the industry works, come work for me. And that's how I got my foot in the door. He was a great person to learn from. I mean, he was really big in the 90s. I mean, he worked on, he was the producer of X-Men and Wild Wild West and Ace Ventura 2 and Married to the Mob and Hard to Kill. He'd been around the industry a while, and it was a great place to learn. And, I was on his desk as an assistant for about 2 years, and then I worked as an executive at that company for 3 years before really kind of transitioning back to focusing on my own creative.
And do you think something like that is a case of putting yourself in those positions, trying to get out there and kind of put yourself forward? Or what would you say is the key to something like that?
I think, look, you could write a brilliant screenplay or you could direct a brilliant short film. And if it doesn't get in front of the right people, it's never going to happen. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I didn't know anyone when I moved out to Los Angeles. And I got that internship from applying on a job board, like there wasn't like any kind of nepotism that was involved in me getting that job. And so I kind of look at it, I'm like, if I can do it, then it's totally replicable, if you have the right pieces of material. I happen to have 2 really good short films that showed that I knew where to put the camera and how to get performances out of people. And that was enough to be like, okay, this kid's hungry, he's talented, let me give him some rope to hang himself with,
Yeah. And how did that feel for you to move to LA? And like you said, not know anybody, not really have any ins, and essentially feel, I guess, isolated or alone in a way. How did you cope with? Because I would imagine there's probably lots of people that move to Hollywood and it never goes anywhere, or they just fall apart. Their lives fall apart. They end up back home, or they end up in a worse position. Yeah.
And you're not wrong. I mean, it's the city of dreams. It's also the city where dreams go to die, I think, too. But, it was funny. My wife was like, okay, I know you want to do this, but I'm not ready to move out to LA yet. So it's funny that you mentioned like being lonely, because the first 10 months I was in LA, she was still in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I was commuting back and forth on the weekends.
Wow.
So during the week, I was living with a guy who was about 15 years older than me, and a really nice guy, but like we didn't really hang out or like talk, and I didn't know him. It was just a guy I found on roommates.com. So, I mostly just sat in this empty apartment by myself for those first 10 months until I was able to, get a stable job, and Crystal was able to get a job out here that allowed her to transition out here. And then it was much better. But those first 10 months were really tough. I would mostly go to work, come home, pick something up at the grocery store, and eat dinner out of a plastic container.
Yeah, I feel like that gets cast over a lot. I know, like, there's the cliche, you've got to want these things bad enough, you've got to be willing to die. And it's kind of like a cliche thing to say, but I do think that just from talking to different people and just from what you've just said, it seems like you really do have to be willing to sacrifice and maybe risk all your safety nets and maybe persevere through. Because I'm sure there was probably points where you've been like, you know what, this isn't going to happen, or it's too tough, I can't take it. And I guess people don't realize that.
What's really funny is I feel like every time it feels like we're about to reach a cliff. This happens to me, and it's happened to some of my other friends too. When we start to reach that cliff, something happens, like an opportunity falls out of the sky, and it buoys you just long enough to keep you going.
Yeah.
I literally had a friend who was moving home. He ran out of money from his first screenplay sale. He was moving home back to Washington, D.C. He was in Texas on his drive back, and he got a call that he'd been hired to work on a TV show.
Wow.
And he had to turn around and come back and then go fly to Puerto Rico to work on this writer's room for a couple months. And he's been back in the game ever since, So, but yeah, it's tough. I mean, those first 10 months, like when I said an empty apartment, I had an air mattress, my suitcase with clothes, and my computer. And that was it. Like, I was literally living in an empty apartment until my wife got out here, because I couldn't afford to bring everything else out yet.
Yeah. I and that kind of reminds me of, like, I've seen multiple pictures and drawings and illustrations of, you see the guy and he's like mining for diamonds, and he's like right there, and he decides to give up. Yeah. And it's like, it kind of, just when we got on this topic, it kind of ties into something I was going to ask a little bit later. But what advice would you give for somebody who, and I know this is probably not the case, but a lot of people would maybe look at somebody like you and consider you to have like the 1%er life in a way. And like, what advice would you give to somebody who, I get so many questions, and like even for yourself, I had so many messages come in about like, how do I get involved in this? It mightn't necessarily be directing a movie, but to get involved in the maybe not so common job. You don't want to be a lawyer, a doctor. I want to make movies. I want to produce movies. I want to be involved in.
Well, I think there's a couple things that go with it. I mean, it certainly is possible, to be a writer and live somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Like, it is possible, but it's infinitely harder. And I can really only speak to the way that I did it, which mm-hmm. was, I worked a lot of production jobs before I moved to LA, and I saved as much money as I possibly could. I saved about $10,000. And then I moved out here and I did an internship, and I was blowing through it on rent and food and just trying to find some kind of job. And I think people have to be really prepared for that idea that you can move to LA and it could be a while before, you can land something. And when I did this was 2010. So it was before you could drive for Uber or, be a delivery person for Uber Eats or what have you, right? Like when I was doing it, there wasn't any gig economy to buoy myself with. And I probably would have done something like that, just to give myself more runway.
Yeah.
Had things not worked out. I got very lucky that this was a 3-month internship, and I got hired for a job at the end of the 3 months, which, by the way, like that's a rarity. I was an exception. Most people, when they get started on the executive side of the entertainment industry, they usually start in a mailroom at a talent agency. Mm-hmm. And then from there, they can get jobs at production companies and studios, or they'll stay in representation, like what have you. But it's kind of almost seen as like a grad school-esque step. And so I was very lucky that I got to skip that. But I also recognize that a lot of my friends who did do that step created kind of a fraternity and sorority of people who also did that step, and who are all now scattered at different parts of the industry. That was something I didn't have. But I got very lucky, because you're talking about just like that loneliness of first moving to LA. Mm-hmm. I got invited to a mixer within probably 2 months of starting as an assistant to Bill. And this girl came up to me, and she noticed I wasn't wearing a name tag. And the reason I didn't put the name tag on was because something that's shadowed me my entire career is there is a much more successful Joe Russo in Hollywood. So you first. Hopefully that's not who you thought you were interviewing.
No.
So that became like a talking point, and she invited me to become part of this kind of networking group that she had. And I got to tell you, like at the time we had events like once a month or every other month or whatever. And it got me through those 10 months. And I met so many of our long-term friends in that group, and I think that's so important when you move to LA is finding that group of people that are in the industry that are the same level as you, that are going to go up the ladder with you. And I mean, that was great. And then the other thing that happened that was really good for me, just in terms of networking and meeting people, was I got very lucky that when I became an exec at my company, I had an expense account. So I could take people to coffees and lunches and drinks and such. And I just tried to meet at least 2 to 3 new people a week. And if you do that, by the time the year's over, you've met 100 new people.
Yeah.
And I, was able to do that for 3 or 4 years. So it allowed me to really build out my network of contacts. And, sure, some of them have come and gone and left the industry or changed the types of jobs and what have you. But I met a lot of friends. And anytime I pick up the phone to call one of those people, there's a warm greeting on the other end, and that I think changes everything with your career,
Yeah. So I guess you would probably recommend getting into the industry at any level.
I mean, at the bottom, and try to meet as many people as you can. Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people, I had a lot of friends that I went to film school with who came out and did similar things like I did when I was in Arizona and worked on different shows and such, but they didn't readjust their expectations. And they were like, well, but I did all these things. I should be getting these bigger jobs. And I was like, no, I'm going to start from the bottom, and, I had one friend in particular who has since left the industry. I think someday he'll make another play for it. But he said, you did it right and I did it wrong. And I do think that you got to be prepared, to work your way up from the bottom. Now I was 25 when I did this, and the thing about that is I was on the old end of the spectrum to get started in Hollywood. A lot of these people who work these like mailroom level, assistant level jobs are early 20s, and so I do think Hollywood is a young man's game. I think you can always write something or direct a great short at any point in your life, but the earlier you can get started, I think the better, because it takes so gosh darn long.
Yeah, I think, and that's something that's really funny. Like somebody might look at you, for example, and you've been doing this in LA now for what, 10 years? Yeah, it's 2000. So this June will be 11 years since I moved out here. And like, I'm sure it's like that thing where it's like, oh, Joe is such an overnight success. And it's like, yeah, well, that's an 11-year overnight success just in LA before all the other stuff I've had to do and sacrifices and whatever else. I mean,
Nightmare Cinema alone, which, is probably my most well-regarded movie that I produced. That movie took 5 years from my meeting Mick Garris for the first time to release. That's a long time. And boy, was my pay not commiserate with that,
So you got involved with Crypt TV back
when they were really starting. Yeah. I did a short for them, a Valentine's Day short, which was kind of like a Halloween send up, which is I think where my brain was going.
Yeah. Did you have that? Because I was interested to find out, because I used to write articles for Crypt TV, back when they very first started. I got in contact with Jack, and we've kind of been back and forth. And
nice. I
was just wondering, was that short already created, or did you come on board and create that with them?
No, we created that with them.
All right. Okay.
So it happened really, really fast. They saw a couple of my prior shorts, and they were like, they were really just getting started with manufacturing kind of shorts to put on the channel because they had to feed that beast, you know? And so I think we started talking to them in December. We were shooting like third week in January, and it came out on Valentine's Day. Like it was like that. We were running with that one.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. It was crazy.
They've really been pumping out the content. It's like to see their journey from like 7-8 years ago to now. Is crazy.
Yeah, and I was there kind of at the early stage, which was cool, and it's a cool thing to have been a part of and to have done. And I've met other folks who have kind of come through that system, like Chelsea Stardust and stuff. It's a nice little like kind of touch point bonding thing.
Yeah,
for us filmmakers who have gone through the Crypt TV graduate program.
Yeah, because now it kind of sounds like maybe there's younger people who like Crypt TV has always been around.
Yeah,
and it's funny, like they're not even 10 years old, like at this point.
To me, it still feels brand new.
Yeah,
but it was crazy. It was a real whirlwind. And the other thing that was kind of wild too was while we were shooting it, we were also prepping Nightmare Cinema. So I was like, I was literally in Burbank at the Nightmare Cinema production office. And then I would have to drive across town to Manhattan Beach to my editor to go work on that at night. It was wild.
So when you got involved in Nightmare Cinema, it was probably what, 2000?
I was 2014. Okay. Mick came in for a general meeting at that production company I was at, Level 1. And he said, ever since Masters of Horror had gone off the air, he'd always wanted to try and rebrand it, reboot it, because he doesn't. There's a collective of people who own the title Masters of Horror, and he doesn't necessarily want to be in business with that collective. So he's like, I want to do a spiritual successor under a new name. And I was like, I loved Masters of Horror. I don't know how we'll get it done, but I want to get it done, And so we took it out as a TV pitch. We were going to try to do it like Masters of Horror. Yeah. And boy, I got to tell you, someday I should find the list of names that had given us permission to say they wanted to be a part of it, because it was unbelievable. The folks that he has access to that said they would do a segment. And we took that to a couple of different studios, got down the road with a couple of them, including the Weinstein Company, and which would have been really interesting. Thank God that didn't work out. It ultimately didn't catch fire because even though they had Masters of Horror as a proof of concept, people still didn't believe that when the scripts were written and it was time to make it, that some of these top tier directors would take the time to come make their episode. And they were worried that they were going to get some of the names towards the bottom of the list that they weren't as excited about. Okay. And we couldn't really rectify that. And my boss at the time decided that the project was dead. There was no way to make it happen. And when I left about 6 months after that, I called Mick up and I said, I still love this and I still want to try to figure it out. And through a weird circumstance where we were going to do it as a digital play, like almost like shorts that we would put online, like Alter or Crypt TV, that turned into a company saying, well, there's no money in that. Why don't we just make it as a feature? And then that's kind of how the deal came together for Nightmare Cinema.
Wow, I had no idea that the original plan was to go down like the Masters of Horror route. And not like, because I love the movie, but in a way I kind of feel greedy. I would have liked to have seen it
more.
Yeah, like go on and on and on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're still hopeful it might go on and on and on, but we are talking with Shudder right now about doing a Nightmare Cinema 2.
Nice.
So, fingers crossed. I would love to do that again. I've developed such great relationships with those 5 filmmakers, and I feel it was like the best graduate school I could have ever asked to go to, so I hope we can do it. And I hope that, whoever those next wave of directors are, I can, hopefully I'll just develop even greater relationships, So I would like to see it happen greedily just from that perspective. But I would also it's the movie. It's been such a great thrill to be a part of it and to have it be so warmly received by the genre community. And I would just like to do another one for the fans,
Yeah. Yeah. Cause it really feels like that as well. It really feels like a passion project.
It was. I mean, I'll tell you, I probably made less than most people on the crew. Like by the time, we'll air a little dirty laundry. No, people don't know this, but like when we were about 3 weeks before production started, our financier basically put a gun to all the producers' heads and made us take a 50% haircut on our fees, or they weren't going to make the movie. So yeah, I watched 50% of my income go away on that movie overnight. And thank God I sold my first screenplay at pretty much the same time, because had that not happened, I wouldn't have made any money during the course of production. They because of that 50% haircut, the 2 executive producers ended up getting into a legal spat. And it delayed me getting paid until after the movie was finished, like well after the movie was finished. So I didn't see any money come in on that movie for myself until about 6 months after production.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So I'll never forget, there was this like one parking lot security guy who was watching the cars, and he's like, "There's the producer, there's the money, making the big bucks." And I'm like, right now you're getting paid more than I am. You're getting paid. I'm not getting paid. Like, I'm doing this for free. I'm doing this out of the goodness of my heart at the moment. I mean, because I didn't know if that was ever going to get resolved. So I said, like, I was like the most highly respected unpaid intern on a movie ever.
Yeah, and I guess when they start to get into and you hear about it times again, those things can get like super messy. Yeah. And it just
And my job was basically to protect the filmmakers from that stuff. Like, I didn't want them to know that there was all these perilous things that were happening kind of behind the scenes. And, so Mick and I mostly, were a buffer to a lot of those dramas. Yeah. And the great thing was they didn't know, and they felt like they had the resources and support to do work that they were excited about doing. And that's why I think, we walked away with a good movie, and why I walked away with those directors as friends.
There's a question that I got asked to ask you probably 20 times. And it seems like a really, like, maybe in a way, maybe like a stupid question. But what exactly is a producer, or how does somebody become involved in that aspect of it? Because a lot of people had said to me,
what the hell did he do on that movie?
Yeah, well, I would like to know how to get myself into that aspect. I don't want to direct. I took maybe a swipe at writing screenplays and stuff. It didn't work out. I want to stay involved, but I want to go a different road.
Well, there's a lot of different types of producers, and I think that's where I think people get confused about what generally the job entails. And the answer is there's a myriad of potential ways you can become a producer. Probably the easiest way to get a producer credit on anything is to either find the intellectual property that it's based on, whether it's a book, a comic, et cetera, a true life story, and get the rights to that thing, or create the original idea and concept. Like Mick and I kind of, through conversations, we became the parents of Nightmare Cinema. So I kind of got to go along the journey because I was there at inception, where these conversations were born, and I was the one who linked him up with the people who paid for the screenplay and the people who ended up paying for the movie. So that kind of gave me that producer credit. Even if I wasn't on set one day, I had already earned my keep as the person who kind of helped put the movie together. But, as a director myself, I greedily wanted to watch Joe Dante direct and Nick Garris direct and David Slade direct and Ryu Kinemura direct and Alejandro Brugues direct. So I was on set every single day, sitting with them, talking with them, listening, watching. If they wanted to bounce ideas off of me, I was there to, be bounced off of. I'll never forget, like, there was this one day where David just started explaining his process to me, and he was probably just talking it through. But I was just like, oh my gosh, like, this is
priceless.
Priceless. Yeah. To just be here in this moment. And so, I but the person who kind of managed the production, which I think is the other side to producing, her name was Nancy Leopardi. She was one of the producers on the movie. And I mean, she deserves all the credit, I think, for that movie looking as good as it does and the production running as smoothly as it does. And because she, turned, dimes into dollars. Because that movie cost way less than I think people think it probably did. And, she had a great crew. And she managed the production really, really well. And, but yeah, I mean, I essentially became the go-between between our financiers and whatever, dramas they were dealing with and Nancy. And so if things bubbled up that needed to go to the financier, I would kind of take that up with her, and bring it up the ladder, and vice versa. If there was something that came down from on high, I would, Mick and I would bring it back down to her. And so I basically became a conduit go-between.
Do you, would you call it a high pressure, a high stress position to be in, or how do you cope with that?
I mean, it is, because you're dealing with, I mean, in this case with Nightmare, I mean, it was, about a $2 million budget. So you're dealing with millions of dollars. But I think at the end of the day, you have to remind yourself that you're making a movie and it's not brain surgery and people's lives aren't on the line. And, I think if you take that step back and you breathe, which some, especially when you're directing, it can be hard to do because so much of, you was invested in it. But I think you have to kind of step back and remind yourself of that when you get into those moments. But that can be really tricky. And I've certainly, it's something that I'm still learning to cope with.
Support First Class Horror on Patreon for as little as $1. Can't get enough of the horror? Carve yourself a deal from official merchandise only on Teespring. Join us on all social media at First Class Horror. We have such sights to show you.